What does it mean to stand against the abyss? Not to merely glimpse its shadow, nor to skirt its edges, but to step willingly into its fire, to let its weight press upon your soul, and yet to hold fast to a light that was never yours to claim. In the deep places of the world where stone weeps and silence screams, a truth was forged not in the clash of swords, nor in the triumph of banners, but in a single moment of defiance. This is no tale of glory's bright dawn, nor of a hero crowned with stars. It is a song of a breath, a heartbeat when light met darkness on the narrow bridge of Khazad-dûm. This is the story of Gandalf the Balrog and the abyss that dwells in us all. Long before the world knew him as the White, before the ring was cast into flame, before the horns of Rohan sang, Gandalf walked Middle-earth as a wanderer. His cloak was grey, weathered by rain and dust, his staff a simple branch, his eyes heavy with the weight of unseen burdens. He was Olorin in the west, a mire of wisdom sent by the Valar to kindle hope in a world that teetered on the edge of shadow. Yet he was no king, no lord of towers. He was a guide, a spark, a voice that whispered courage to the weary. But courage is a fragile thing, and in the deep places it is tested by fire. The Fellowship of the Ring had entered Moria, that ancient kingdom of the dwarves, where once the hammers rang, and Mithril gleamed like moonlight caught in stone. But Moria was no longer a hall of splendour. Its corridors were choked with darkness, its air thick with the memory of ruin. Frodo the Ringbearer carried a burden heavier than the mountains, his heart shadowed by the ring's whispers. The Fellowship moved as phantoms through the gloom, their steps echoing in halls that had forgotten joy. Gandalf led them, his staff. A faint glow, his mind searching paths lost to time. Yet something stirred in the deep, something older than the roots of the earth, something that had slumbered since the world was young. What is the abyss? It is not merely the dark beneath the stone, nor the flame that hungers for flesh. It is the doubt that gnaws at the heart, the fear that coils in the silence, the temptation to turn back when the way forward is veiled. For Gandalf, the abyss was not unknown. He had seen it in the faltering steps of men, in the pride of Saruman, in the shadow that crept from Mordor's gates. But in Moria, the abyss took form. It was fire and shadow, a Balrog of Morgoth, a creature born of malice in the elder days. Its wings were darkness, its whip a lash of flame, its presence a weight that crushed the soul. The Fellowship fled, their courage fraying like thread. But Gandalf knew there was no outrunning this foe. The abyss does not flee, it waits. On the Bridge of Khazad-dûm, narrow as a blade over a chasm without end, Gandalf turned. "You cannot pass," he said, his voice steady, though the air trembled with the Balrog's wrath. The words were not a challenge nor a boast, but a vow to the light he bore, to the hope he kindled, to the Fellowship that stood behind him. In that moment he was no longer merely a wizard, no longer Olorin of the West. He was a servant of the secret fire, the flame of Anor, the light that Ilúvatar wove into the world before time began. And the Balrog, ancient and terrible, was its antithesis, a shadow that sought to unmake all that the light had wrought. What does it mean to face the abyss? It is not to stand fearless, for fear is the pulse of life. It is to stand knowing that you may fall, that the fire may consume you, that the darkness may claim you. Gandalf knew this. His staff blazed his sword, Glamdring gleamed like a star, but his heart was not untouched by dread. The Balrog's flame was not merely heat, it was despair. It was the weight of ages, it was the memory of Morgoth's dominion. Yet Gandalf did not falter. He struck the bridge, and the stone shattered, and the Balrog fell its roar, a thunder that shook the deep. But the abyss is not so easily defied. The Balrog's whip lashed out, coiling around Gandalf's legs, and he too was pulled into the dark. The Fellowship wept, believing him lost. Frodo's heart broke, for Gandalf had been his guide, his shield. Aragorn, son of Arathorn, led them onward, his face grim, for he knew the cost of such a stand. But Gandalf's tale did not end on the bridge. He fell deeper than the roots of the mountains into a darkness that was more than shadow. He pursued the Balrog, or was pursued through caverns where no light had ever shone. They fought not as men fight, but as spirits of fire and shadow. Their struggle, a clash of wills that echoed the music of the Ainur. From the lowest depths to the highest peak of Zirakzigil they battled, until at last Gandalf cast the Balrog down, and its fire was quenched. Yet victory was not sweet. Gandalf lay upon the mountain, his body broken, his spirit spent. He had faced the abyss and prevailed, but at a cost that no song could fully tell. He had not fought for glory, nor for power, but for others, for Frodo, for the Fellowship, for a world that might yet be saved. And in that moment of sacrifice, the valor called him back. He was sent again, no longer grey but white-clothed in light, his power renewed. But the memory of the abyss remained a scar upon his soul, a reminder that even the greatest light must pass through shadow. What is the light that Gandalf carried? It was not his own, though it burned within him. It was the secret fire, the spark of Ilúvatar's will, the hope that endures when all else fails. It was the same light that Frodo bore, though he knew it not, in the phial of Galadriel that glowed in Shelob's lair. It was the light that Aragorn kindled in the hearts of the Rohirrim, when he rode to the Pelennor fields. It was the light that Samwise saw in the stars above Mordor when despair seemed absolute. This light is not a weapon nor a shield, but a truth that the darkness, though vast, is not eternal. The abyss is within us all. It is the fear that we are not enough, the burden we cannot bear, the temptation to yield to despair. Gandalf's stand on the bridge is not a tale of a wizard's might, but a mirror held to our own souls. How often do we face our own Balrog's moments when the way forward is narrow, when the fire roars, when the world demands more than we believe we can give? And yet, like Gandalf, we are not alone. The light we carry is not ours alone. It is the faith of those who trust us, the love of those who stand with us, the hope that was kindled before the world began. Consider Frodo, who walked into Mordor with the ring, a weight that grew heavier with every step. He did not choose his burden yet. He bore it not for himself, but for others. His abyss was not a creature of fire, but a whisper in his mind, a shadow that promised power, rest, release. Yet he walked on step by agonizing step, because the light of the Shire of Sam of Gandalf burned still in his heart. Frodo's journey was not one of triumph, but of endurance, of carrying a light he could barely see. Consider Aragorn, who walked the paths of the dead, facing the ghosts of his lineage. His abyss was not a chasm, but a legacy of Isildur's failure, of a kingdom broken, of a crown he feared to claim. Yet he stepped into the shadow, not for glory, but for duty, for the hope that a king might yet unite the free peoples. His light was the memory of Elendil, the love of Arwen, the trust of Gandalf. It was enough to carry him through. Consider Éowyn, who stood against the Witch King, her heart aflame with defiance, though fear clutched her soul. Her abyss was not a creature alone, but the cage of her own despair, the belief that her life was bound to wither in silence, yet she rode to battle, not as a shield maiden seeking death, but as a soul seeking meaning. Her light was the courage of Theoden, the hope of a world freed, the refusal to let shadow have the final word. Each faced their abyss, each stood upon their bridge, and each found a light that carried them through. But what of the silence that follows? For Gandalf, the silence was not the end. It was a pause, a breath, a moment when the world held its breath. In the silence he was remade, not as a conqueror, but as a servant still. The abyss does not vanish. It lingers a shadow at the edge of sight. Yet the light endures not because it is stronger, but because it is shared. Gandalf returned, but he did not speak of his battle in the deep. His silence was not shame, but reverence, a recognition that some truths are too vast for words. The Balrog was not merely a creature of fire and shadow. It was a memory of the world's first sin, when Morgoth defied the music and sought to unmake what Ilúvatar had wrought. It was a remnant of the elder days, when the Silmarils burned and the trees of Valinor wept. To face it was to face the weight of history, the legacy of choices made long before Gandalf's time. And yet, he stood. He stood, because the past is not a chain, but a thread woven into the present. The sins of Morgoth, the pride of Feanor, The fall of Númenor. All are shadows, but shadows pass. What is temptation, if not the whisper of the abyss? To Gandalf it came not in Moria, but long before, when the ring was offered to him by Frodo in Bag End. "Do not tempt me," he said, his voice heavy with the knowledge of his own power. He knew that to wield the ring would make him a new shadow, greater and more terrible than Sauron. The abyss is not only the enemy without, but the enemy within the desire to control, to dominate, to bend the world to our will. Gandalf resisted not because he was without desire, but because he knew the cost. The Balrog was a foe he could strike. The ring was a foe he could only refuse. And what of faith? Faith is not the absence of doubt, but the choice to act despite it. Gandalf's faith was not in himself, but in the world he served. He believed in Frodo, though the hobbit doubted his own strength. He believed in Aragorn, though the man bore the weight of a broken lineage. He believed in the small, the humble, the forgotten, Bilbo Sam, the Shire folk, because he knew that the light shines brightest in the meek. On the bridge, his faith was not that he would prevail, but that his stand would matter, that the fellowship would carry on, that the world would endure. Loss is the shadow's companion. Gandalf lost much in Moria, not merely his life, but his peace, his ease, his certainty. When he returned as the White, he was not the same. His laughter was rarer, his gaze more distant. The abyss marks those who face it, not with scars of flesh, but with scars of spirit. Yet loss is not the end. It is a forging. From the ashes of Gandalf, the grey rose Gandalf, the White, not greater in power, but deeper in wisdom. Loss strips away what is false, leaving only what is true. Legacy is the light we leave behind. Gandalf's stand on the bridge was not for himself, but for those who came after. He did not see the ring destroyed, nor the towers of Barad-dûr fall. Yet his light burned in Frodo's courage, in Aragorn's kingship, in Sam's steadfastness. Legacy is not in what we achieve, but in what we inspire. The fellowship carried Gandalf's light, though they knew it not, and through them the world was changed. Hope is not a promise, but a defiance. It is the refusal to let the abyss have the final word. In Moria, hope was not that Gandalf would return, but that his sacrifice would not be in vain. Hope is the star that shines above Mordor, the flower that blooms in Ithilien, the child born in the Fourth Age. It is the knowledge that the music of Ilúvatar continues, though we hear only its echoes. Gandalf's hope was not in victory, but in meaning that the light would endure, though he might not. The abyss is not a place, but a question. It asks, will you stand? Will you carry the light, though it burns? Will you face the fire, though it consumes? Gandalf answered not with words, but with his life. His stand on the bridge was a single note in the music, a moment when the discord of Morgoth was met with the harmony of Ilúvatar. It was not the end, but a beginning, a spark that kindled fires across Middle-earth. But let us linger in the shadow a moment longer, for the abyss is not one thing alone. It is the weight of history, the echo of choices, the pull of despair. In Moria, Gandalf faced not only the Balrog, but the legacy of the dwarves, whose greed for mithril woke the shadow long ago. Durin's folk delved too deep, seeking wealth beyond measure, and in their hunger they stirred the fire that slept. The Balrog was not their creation, but their reckoning, a reminder that every choice ripples through time. So too do our choices, small and great, weave the tapestry of our lives. The abyss is not only the foe we face, but the consequences we inherit, the burdens we bear for those who came before. And what of the fellowship who stood behind Gandalf on the bridge? They were not spared the abyss, though he shielded them from its fire. Frodo carried the ring, a shadow that grew heavier with every step. Aragorn bore the weight of his lineage, a crown he feared to claim. Legolas and Gimli elf and dwarf carried the grudges of their peoples, though their friendship would forge a new light. Boromir, proud son of Gondor, wrestled with temptation, his heart torn between duty and desire. Merry and Pippin hobbits far from home faced a world too vast for their small hands. Each bore their own abyss, their own bridge, their own fire. Gandalf's stand was not for himself but for them, for the chance that they might carry the light a little further. The Balrog, too, is more than it seems. It is not merely a creature of Morgoth, but a symbol of the world's first wound. In the beginning, before the world was made, Melkor sang discord into the music of Ilúvatar, seeking to drown the harmony with his own will. From that discord came the shadows of Arda, war-pride ruin. The Balrog was born of that ancient rebellion, a servant of the first enemy, a flame that burned against the light. To face it was to face the root of all evil, the defiance that sought to unmake the world. Yet Ilúvatar's music could not be undone. Even in discord, harmony wove its thread, turning sorrow to beauty, loss to redemption. Gandalf's stand was a note in that music, a moment when the light answered the shadow. What is sacrifice if not the heart of Gandalf's tale? He did not stand on the bridge to save himself, but to save others. He fell not for his own glory, but for the hope that Frodo might reach Mount Doom, that Aragorn might claim his throne, that the world might endure. Sacrifice is not the loss of life, but the giving of it. It is the mother who shields her child, the friend who stays behind the stranger who risks all for another. Sacrifice is the light that shines brightest in the dark, not because it seeks to be seen, but because it seeks to serve. And what of the deep places where Gandalf fell? They are not merely caverns, but the hidden corners of the soul. In the depths where no light shines, we face our truest selves. Gandalf's battle with the Balrog was not only a clash of fire and shadow, but a journey through his own limits. He was Olorin, a Maya of wisdom. Yet, in Moria, he was mortal, frail, bound to a body that could break. In the deep he faced not only the Balrog, but the question of his own strength, his own purpose. The abyss strips away pretense, leaving only truth. And in that truth, Gandalf found the will to fight not for himself, but for the world above. The peak of Zirakzigil, where the battle ended, is a place of paradox. It is the highest point yet, born of the deepest fall. It is where Gandalf triumphed, yet where he lay broken. It is where the Balrog was cast down, yet where Gandalf's own life flickered. The peak is not a place of victory, but of revelation. It is where the light is seen not as a blaze, but as a spark that endures, though the fire fades. On Zirakzigil, Gandalf saw the world anew, not as a battle to be won, but as a song to be sung, a light to be carried, a hope to be shared. The return of Gandalf, as the White, is not a triumph, but a transformation. He was sent back not to conquer, but to continue. His power was greater, his light brighter, but his burden heavier. The abyss had marked him not with weakness, but with wisdom. He returned not to lead armies, but to guide hearts. He returned not to wield the ring, but to refuse it. He returned not to rule, but to serve. The White was not a new Gandalf, but a deeper one, forged in fire, tempered in shadow, shaped by sacrifice. What is the secret fire? The flame of Anor. It is not a power to be wielded, but a truth to be lived. It is the will of Ilúvatar, the harmony of the music, the light that burns in every soul. It is the courage of Frodo, the loyalty of Sam, the honor of Aragorn, the defiance of Éowyn. It is the hope that blooms in the wasteland, the love that endures through loss, the faith that carries on through doubt. Gandalf was its servant, not its master. He carried it not to shine for himself, but to kindle it in others. The abyss is not one moment, but many. It is the Bridge of Khazad-dûm, but also the fires of Mount Doom, the paths of the dead, the fields of Pelennor. It is every moment when the heart falters, when the way is lost, when the shadow seems eternal, yet in every moment there is a light. It is not always seen, not always felt, but it is there. It is the light of friendship, of memory, of purpose. It is the light that Gandalf carried, that Frodo bore, that Aragorn kindled, that Sam saw in the stars. The Song of Gandalf and the Balrog is not a tale of endings but of beginnings. It is a reminder that the abyss is not the final word, that the light is not ours alone, that the music continues, though we hear only its echoes. It is a call to stand, not because we are strong, but because we are needed. It is a whisper to carry the light, not because it is easy, but because it is true. It is a song that fades not into silence, but into memory, into hope, into the eternal harmony of Ilúvatar's will. And so we stand, not at the end, but at a threshold. The abyss waits, as it always has, but so does the light. The fire roars, but the spark endures. The shadow looms, but the stars shine. Gandalf's stand on the bridge was a single note, a single breath. Yet it echoes still. It echoes in the courage of those who face their own darkness, in the love of those who stand together, in the hope of those who carry on. The abyss asks, "Will you stand?" And the light answers, "I will." The song fades now like a wind that carries the memory of fire. It lingers in the heart, a whisper of courage, a call to stand upon our own bridges. The abyss waits, but so does the light. And in the silence we hear the echo of a voice ancient and kind saying, "You cannot pass." Not because the shadow is weak, but because the light is strong. Not because we are fearless, but because we are not alone. If this tale of light and shadow has stirred your heart, join us in exploring the deep myths of Middle-earth. Subscribe to our channel. Click the bell to be notified of new journeys, and share this video with fellow wanderers of Arda. Together, let us carry the light a little further. Until the next tale, farewell, and may the stars guide your path.